It all starts with what looks like just another day, just another stop, just another woman walking down the street. But when two corrupt cops decide they're going to humiliate and frame a black Navy SEAL right in front of everyone, they have no idea who they're dealing with. Because this isn't just any woman, this is the wrong woman to mess with. And what happens next? It's a battle of power, lies, and cold, hard justice. You won't believe until you hear the whole story. Stick with us, because the ending, you're not going to see it coming. And while you're here, let us know what time are you watching this, and where are you tuning in from? Drop us a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe, because you're not going to want to miss what's coming next. There are moments in life when returning home doesn't feel like a homecoming at all. And for Maya Carter, today was one of those moments. The small Georgia town she left behind years ago hadn't changed much. The same old diner with the flickering neon sign, the same uneven sidewalks cracked by tree roots, and the same faces behind familiar shop windows. But Maya had changed in ways none of these people could possibly imagine. She walked slowly down Main Street that morning, the summer sun already beating down, filling the air with a thick southern humidity that clung to the skin. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, just a simple, sleeveless sundress in navy blue, sandals that had seen better days, and a pair of dark sunglasses shielding her eyes from the glare. No one would look at her and think, war hero. No one would guess that this woman, moving quietly through a sleepy farmer's market, had once led classified missions on foreign soil, that she had stood in places where every breath could have been her last, that she had carried the weight of her team's lives on her shoulders more times than she cared to count. To them, she was just another black woman passing through. To them, she was nothing special. Maya knew that look all too well. She could feel the stares as she walked by a vendor selling peaches and tomatoes, like invisible fingers brushing against her skin. She could feel the weight of judgment without a single word being spoken. The same weight she used to feel as a kid in this very town. Back then, it had been small things: a teacher's narrowed eyes when she asked too many questions, a neighbor's fake smile that never quite reached their eyes. But as she grew older, that weight became sharper, heavier. The world had a way of reminding her that confidence was a threat when worn by someone who looked like her. She took a deep breath and kept walking. Her heels clicked softly on the pavement as she passed by the bakery, catching the faint scent of fresh bread and cinnamon. For a moment, it almost felt full. Almost. But peace never lasted long in a place where people carried long memories and short tempers. As Maya neared the coffee stand at the corner of the market, she noticed a sheriff's patrol car parked just down the street. She didn't think much of it at first. Small towns had always had cops hanging around the market, sipping coffee, nodding to the locals they recognized. But as she reached into her bag for her wallet, she felt the unmistakable prickling sensation on the back of her neck. Someone was watching her. Hard. She glanced up slowly, not moving too fast, not wanting to draw attention. But it was already too late. She met the eyes of Officer Darren Brooks, standing by the car, arms crossed over his chest, like he'd been waiting for someone to give him a reason to ruin their day. He wasn't some rookie. He was the kind of cop who'd been around long enough to believe he owned this street, that his badge gave him the right to question whoever he pleased. And right now, his eyes were locked on her like she was a problem he needed to solve. Maya felt her stomach tighten, but she didn't flinch. She paid for her coffee, nodded politely to the barista, and turned to walk away. Maybe if she kept moving, he'd find someone else to harass. But deep down, she knew better. Men like Brooks didn't back down once they'd made up their minds. And today, Maya Carter had a target painted on her back. As she walked away from the coffee stand, she could hear the slow crunch of boots on gravel behind her. Steady. Calculated. Like a predator closing in. And just like that, she knew. Her return home was about to turn into a confrontation she hadn't asked for. But one she was more than ready to face. Because what Brooks didn't know, what nobody on that street knew, was that Maya Carter wasn't just another woman walking through town. She was a Navy SEAL. And the moment he laid a hand on her, he was going to find out exactly who he was dealing with. Stay tuned, because what happens next, you won't believe how it all goes down. Maya Carter knew that walking away would never be enough. She could feel the weight of Officer Darren Brooks's eyes drilling into her back with every step she took. It wasn't just suspicion. No. It was something colder. Something sharper. The kind of attention that black folks in towns like this had learned to recognize long before they were old enough to explain it. It wasn't about what she was doing. It was about who she was. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder bag, holding her coffee a little tighter, her mind running through options like a checklist. Stay calm, keep moving, don't escalate. She had told herself those same words in war zones far from home, but somehow they felt heavier here on this small street she used to run down as a little girl chasing fireflies. How strange that a place could feel both familiar and hostile all at once. She made it halfway down the block before she heard the heavy footfalls closing in behind her. Deliberate, measured, slow, like someone who wanted her to hear. Someone who wanted her to feel the pressure of being hunted without needing to raise his voice. "Excuse me, ma'am." The words cut through the humid morning like a blade. Maya stopped mid-step, her jaw tightening. She could already hear the internal voice screaming, "Just keep walking." But she knew better. That would only make it worse. If she ran, he'd claim she was fleeing. If she ignored him, he'd say she was being defiant. Either way, she knew the outcome had already been decided the moment he singled her out. Turning slowly, she faced him, calm, controlled. The kind of composure that had taken her years to master. The kind of stillness that had saved her life more times than she could count. "Yes, officer?" Her voice was polite, but not submissive. Steady, but not aggressive. Brooks smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached the eyes. It was tight, smug, like a man who already believed he had the upper hand. His mirrored sunglasses reflected her face back at Hera, distorted, emotionless version that made her stomach turn. "Haven't seen you around here before? You from out of town?" His voice was syrupy sweet, laced with fake concern that didn't match the way his hand hovered just a little too close to the holster on his hip. Maya kept her expression neutral. "Actually, I grew up here, born and raised." Brooks let out a short, low chuckle, shaking his head like he didn't quite believe her. "Is that so? Funny. I've been patrolling these streets for over 20 years. Can't say I've ever seen you before. What's your name?" And there it was. The first move in the game. He hadn't asked her if she was all right. He hadn't accused her of anything directly. No, this was the fishing expedition digging for a reason to make this encounter official. Maya knew her rights. She didn't owe him her name, not unless he was detaining her, not unless he had reasonable suspicion that she'd done something wrong. "I'm not being detained, am I?" she asked calmly, raising an eyebrow ever so slightly. Brooks's jaw clenched for just a second. A flicker of irritation crossed his face before he leaned in just a little closer. "Just making conversation," he lied, though both of them knew better. Maya nodded slowly, her gaze locked on his face. "Well, officer, if I'm free to go, I'll be on my way." She turned again, but before she could take a full step, Brooks's voice dropped an octave, laced with warning. "See, that's the thing. People who get nervous usually got something to hide. Mind if I ask what's in the bag?" Maya felt the air leave her lungs in a slow, steady breath. She could feel the eyes of a few bystanders now turning toward them. Not many, but enough to make her skin prickle. She could almost hear the unspoken question in their heads. What did she do? That's the thing about being black in America, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. You get the weight of suspicion before you even open your mouth. "There's nothing illegal in my bag," she replied, her voice still steady, though her heart was pounding hard in her chest. Brooks took a step closer, closing the space between them. His voice dropped to a low, patronizing whisper. "Come on now. No need to get defensive. You know how it is around here. Lot of people passing through, causing trouble. Drugs, weapons, fraud." Maya's fists clenched around her coffee cup so tight that the paper lid buckled. She wanted to scream, but she wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, she calmly set the coffee down on the nearby bench, reached into her side pocket, and pulled out her military ID. No sudden movements. No defiance. Just facts. Lieutenant Maya Carter, United States Navy SEAL, recently retired. Brooks stared at the card like she'd just handed him a grenade. He took it from her fingertips, holding it up to the sunlight like he was looking for a trick. "Seal, huh?" he muttered, loud enough for a couple of nearby onlookers to hear. His lips curled into a mocking grin. "Looks fake to me. Where'd you buy this? Some street fair?" Maya didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just stood there, as calm as a statue, knowing exactly what was coming next. Because when men like Darren Brooks felt their control slipping, they always doubled down. And Maya Carter, she was ready for it. It started like it always did, quiet, too quiet. You could feel the tension stretch across the air like a wire pulled so tight it was just waiting to snap. Maya Carter stood perfectly still, her military ID still held out between her fingers, as Officer Darren Brooks rolled it back and forth in his hand like some cheap novelty he picked up at a gas station. His grin never reached his eyes. It was the kind of grin that said, "I've already decided who you are," and no piece of plastic was going to change his mind. And that's when it happened, the shift. Small at first, like a ripple on still water. A couple sitting on a bench under the shade of an old oak tree stopped talking. A man getting out of his truck across the street paused, squinting toward the sidewalk. A woman holding a bag of groceries slowed her step, pulling her phone out of her purse, holding it down by her side, already recording without raising it to eye level. People knew. Maybe they didn't know what they were seeing yet, but they felt it in their bones. This wasn't just a routine check. This was something else. Something they'd all seen before in one way or another. That ugly script that plays out in towns like this across America. A black person standing still, while the law circles like a vulture, trying to provoke just one wrong move. Maya knew it too. She felt the eyes on her, not just Brooks, but now from all around. Some curious, some already assuming she must have done something wrong. After all, why else would a cop be hassling her like this? Why else would he be holding her ID like it was some kind of joke? Brooks leaned in closer, lowering his voice just enough so only Maya could hear it. "You military types, you walk around like the rules don't apply to you." He let out a short breath through his nose. "Let me tell you something, lady. That badge might have scared some rookie, but not me. You don't belong here." Maya clenched her jaw. She had heard those words her entire life, in different forms, from different mouths. "You don't belong here," said in classrooms, whispered on playgrounds, shouted by angry men in parking lots, and now, once again, by a man in uniform standing inches from her face. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because from the corner of her eye, she caught movement. Another officer approaching. Officer Jason Reed, younger, leaner, but with that same coldness in his walk, his hands resting casually on his duty belt as he crossed the street, nodding once to Brooks like they'd rehearsed this dance 100 times. Brooks didn't miss a beat. He waved the ID in front of Reed like it was nothing more than a business card. "Look what we got here," he announced, just loud enough for the growing group of bystanders to hear. "A Navy SEAL, or so she claims." Reed raised an eyebrow, then looked Maya up and down, like he was sizing up a problem that didn't need solving. "Really?" he muttered, his voice dripping with fake disbelief. "You don't look like any SEAL I've ever seen." Maya felt her stomach turn. Here we go, she thought. It didn't matter what she showed them. It didn't matter how she stood, how calm she stayed. They had already made up their minds. A teenage girl, standing with her back against a light pole, raised her phone higher now. The red recording dot blinked on the screen as she whispered to the boy next to her. "Start streaming. People need to see this." Maya heard it. She heard the word streaming, and she knew the world was about to watch. Every breath, every word, every move. Brooks handed the ID back to Maya like it was contaminated. "We're gonna need to check that. Step over here, ma'am." Maya didn't move. She planted her feet like roots in the ground. "Am I being detained?" she asked again. Her voice louder now. Not just for Brooks, but for the cameras, for the witnesses, for anyone who might dare to care. Brooks didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his radio, pressing the button just out of Maya's reach, speaking in a calm, almost robotic tone. "Unit 47, requesting immediate backup. Possible 10 to 32. Suspect may be armed. Repeat, possible armed suspect." And there it was, the lie. spoken so smoothly, so routinely, like it was just another box to check on a long list of false reports. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the bitter familiarity of it all. She knew what came next. She'd seen it on the news. She'd heard the stories. Backup would come. Guns would be drawn. And all it would take was one sudden movement for her life, to end right there on that cracked sidewalk. She turned slowly to the small crowd gathering across the street. Her eyes landed on the teenage girl with the live stream. Maya took a deep breath and spoke loud enough for every microphone, every camera, every heart in that moment to hear. "My name is Lieutenant Maya Carter, United States Navy SEAL. I am unarmed. I have presented valid identification. I have done nothing wrong." The girl nodded, pressing her phone closer to her chest, her eyes wide but locked on Maya like she was watching a hero stand against a storm. Maya turned back toward Brooks and Reed, her voice steady as stone. "The whole world is watching now. You sure you want to do this?" And for the first time, she saw it. The flicker, that brief flash of hesitation in Brooks' smug expression, because deep down, he knew she wasn't alone anymore, and that terrified him more than anything. It's a strange thing the way crowds gather when they sense something is about to go wrong. Like moths to a flame, people start to drift in closer, not to help, not to stop it, but to watch, to witness, to record. That's exactly what was happening on that street in Mapleton, Georgia, as Maya Carter stood her ground with two officers tightening their circle around her. Brooks didn't answer her question. He didn't have to. He'd already made his decision. But now, with phones recording from every angle, he had to move differently, more carefully, yet somehow more determined. His pride was on the line. His reputation. And men like him didn't back down when they felt cornered. No, they doubled down. Every single time. He glanced over at Officer Reed, giving a slight nod. The kind of silent cue that spoke volumes. That's when Reed stepped forward, hands resting on his belt, lips curling into a smirk like he'd been waiting for this moment all day. He leaned in close to Maya, invading her space without a hint of shame. "We've got a report of suspicious activity matching your description," he lied without blinking. "You're going to need to come with us." Maya's jaw tightened. "Based on what? You haven't told me I've committed a crime." Reed laughed under his breath, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Come on now. Don't make this harder than it has to be." And with that, Brooks moved in, quick, aggressive. His hand shot out, grabbing Maya's arm before she could even step back. The crowd gasped as the sound of metal handcuffs snapped through the air. One cuff clicked tight around her right wrist, the cold steel biting into her skin. Maya didn't resist. Not yet. She stood still, staring straight ahead, refusing to give them the reaction they so clearly wanted. Brooks leaned into her ear, his breath hot and sour. "You know what your problem is? You think you're better than everyone else. You think that uniform you used to wear makes you untouchable." His grip tightened. "But not today. Not here." Maya closed her eyes for half a second, steadying her breathing. She could feel the adrenaline surging through her veins, screaming at her to act. But she knew how quickly things could spiral. She had to be smarter than them, stronger than the rage building in her chest. She opened her eyes, lifting her chin just slightly. "Is this how you treat a veteran? In front of all these people?" Brooks didn't flinch. He yanked her arm higher, forcing her shoulder toward the brick wall beside them. The rough surface scraped against her skin through the thin fabric of her dress. "That badge don't mean a damn thing out here," he hissed. Across the street, someone shouted, "She didn't do anything!" Another voice echoed, "Let her go!" But no one stepped forward, not yet. They all knew how these things usually played out, and none of them wanted to be next. Brooks turned to Reed again. "Call it in. Say she's resisting." Reed nodded, lifting his radio with a slow, deliberate motion. His voice was flat, mechanical. "Unit 47 requesting immediate backup. Suspect is resisting arrest. Possible 10 to 32. Suspect may be armed. Repeat. Suspect may be armed." Maya's heart dropped. There it was, the lie. The same lie that had cost so many lives before hers. She could already hear the distant sirens, growing louder, closing in like wolves on a wounded deer. She turned toward the crowd again, raising her voice over the noise. "You're all seeing this, right? You're seeing what they're trying to do." The teenage girl with the live stream took a shaky step forward, her voice trembling but clear. "We see you! We got you! It's live!" Maya nodded, holding on to that small sliver of hope. But hope wasn't going to stop what was coming next. Brooks yanked her other arm behind her back, pulling her body tighter against the wall. "I said, stop resisting!" he barked, loud enough to make it seem like she was fighting back. Maya gritted her teeth. She wasn't resisting, she was barely moving. But she knew the game. He was setting the scene, building the story he'd tell later, how she was hostile, how she was dangerous, how he had no choice but to take her down. She glanced at Reed, who was now standing just a few feet away, arms crossed, watching like it was some kind of performance. And that's when she saw it, the smile, that cold, calculated smirk that told her he was enjoying every second of this. Maya felt the rage boil over, not the kind that made you scream. No, the kind that made you laser-focused, the kind that made every movement deliberate, controlled, like a soldier on a mission. She took a slow, steady breath and spoke just loud enough for both officers to hear. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Brooks laughed, tightening his grip even more. "Oh, I think," but Maya knew better. Because these men didn't see her. Not really. They didn't see the years of training, the missions she survived, the brothers and sisters she lost. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the silent tears, the weight of carrying the flag for a country that never carried her. All they saw was a black woman who dared to walk tall in a place where she was expected to shrink. And that's exactly why they were about to lose control of this entire situation. Because Maya Carter wasn't going to break. She wasn't going to bow. Not today. Not ever. And as the backup sirens screamed closer, the world was about to see exactly how a warrior fights back without ever throwing a single punch. The sound of sirens grew louder, bouncing off the buildings like warning shots fired into the sky. More patrol cars were on their way, probably half the force in town. All this for one unarmed woman standing on a sidewalk with a coffee cup and a military ID. But that's how these things go when you've already been labeled a threat. It didn't matter that she hadn't raised her voice, hadn't lifted a hand, hadn't even taken a step without permission. The minute Brooks called in that false report, the machinery had already started turning, and now Maya Carter was the center of it all. Brooks tightened the cuff on her wrist, his hand pressing into the back of her neck as if he was trying to push her right through the brick wall behind her. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, not from fear, but from the rage of knowing how easily this could end the wrong way. She wasn't new to this. She'd seen these tactics in combat zones. You isolate, you dehumanize, you control the narrative before anyone else has a chance to speak. Across the street, the teenage girl with the phone kept streaming. Her voice could barely be heard, whispering into the mic, telling her viewers, "Y'all, she's not even moving. They're lying. She didn't do anything." But even as the truth was being broadcast to thousands, the officers didn't stop. They didn't care about the cameras. They didn't care about the witnesses. Power doesn't hesitate when it's convinced it owns the ending, and that's when the second patrol car arrived. Tires screeched as it pulled up just feet away. Officer Kent Holbrook stepped out. Bigger, meaner. His reputation around town was well known, always first to escalate, always last to admit when he crossed the line. He took one look at Maya, still pressed against the wall, and cracked his knuckles like he was stretching before a fight. "What we got here?" Holbrook called out, already grinning like he was walking into a bar fight, not a police stop. Brooks didn't even look back. He kept his hand on Maya's shoulder, forcing her face toward the wall. "Got ourselves a real patriot here," he sneered. "Claims she's a Navy SEAL." Holbrook let out a low whistle, shaking his head like he'd just heard the punchline to a joke. "That right?" he called out to Maya. "You a SEAL, huh? Looks more like trouble to me." The words stung, not because they were clever, but because they were so predictable. Maya knew this playbook like the back of her hand. You strip away someone's identity. You make them small. You erase everything they've done, everything they've survived, until all that's left is the lie you tell loud enough for the world to hear. Holbrook moved closer, circling around like a shark. He glanced at Reed, who stood with his arms crossed, watching with that same cold distance as before. Brooks shifted his weight, pressing harder into Maya's back. "She's resisting," Claimed her little ID makes her special. Holbrook tilted his head. You resisting, sweetheart? Maya didn't answer. Not because she couldn't, but because she knew nothing she said would matter. The narrative had already been written. She could either play the part they wanted her to, or stand so still that they'd have to reveal themselves to the cameras watching. And that's exactly what she chose. She stood firm, her breathing steady, refusing to flinch, refusing to give them the performance they were hunting for. Holbrook didn't like that, not one bit. You hear me? He barked louder, grabbing her free arm, yanking it back to force both her wrists together behind her. The cuffs bit tighter, cold metal digging into skin that had already been bruised by war. Maya winced but didn't make a sound. Brooks leaned in again, his voice dropping to a low hiss. Ain't nobody gonna save you now? But he was wrong, because just then, another voice cut through the chaos. A new car rolled up. This one wasn't like the others. It wasn't speeding. It didn't have lights blaring. It pulled up slow, steady, like whoever was inside already knew they didn't have to make a scene to take control. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man Maya hadn't seen in years but recognized instantly. Commander Eli Calder. Tall, solid frame. Clean-cut, with that same calm presence he carried back when she trained him in joint military police de-escalation years ago. He didn't move fast. He didn't shout. He simply walked toward the scene with his hands held casually in front of him, palms open. Brooks tensed, recognizing him but not yet understanding what he was walking into. Calder glanced at Maya, his face unreadable for just a moment. But in his eyes, there was something Brooks and the others couldn't see: recognition. He nodded once, then turned to Brooks. What's going on here? Brooks straightened up like a kid caught cheating on a test. Got a suspect resisting arrest. Claims she's a SEAL. Calder's expression didn't change. He took another step closer, stopping just a few feet from Maya. His voice was low, but carried the weight of authority that made even Holbrook shift uncomfortably. She's telling the truth, Calder said, looking directly at Brooks. That's Lieutenant Maya Carter, United States Navy SEAL. I trained with her. I've seen her record. The crowd gasped. A few people whispered, repeating Calder's words to each other. The teenage girl with the phone whispered into her live stream, "Oh my God, it's true." Brooks swallowed hard. His grip on Maya loosened, just slightly. Calder kept going. "You need to release her, right now." But Brooks didn't move. He looked at Holbrook, at Reed, at the gathering crowd. His pride, his ego, they were all stacked on this moment. Maya could feel it, the hesitation. The fear that if he let her go now, he'd lose control in front of everyone. But if he didn't, the backup sirens were still coming. The eyes of the entire town were on him, and Maya Carter was still standing tall, refusing to break. This was the moment, and everyone knew it. You could feel the street holding its breath. Everything seemed to pause, people frozen on the sidewalks, the summer air hanging heavy in the silence, phones shaking slightly in the hands of those who dared to record. Maya Carter stood in the center of it all, her arms pinned painfully behind her back, her head pressed against a brick wall. And yet she stood. She didn't shake. She didn't beg. She didn't even raise her voice. Because she knew men like Darren Brooks were counting on her to break down. That's how they kept control, by making you fall apart while the whole world watched. But Maya had learned long ago that sometimes silence is the sharpest blade you can carry. Sometimes standing still when they expect you to fall is the loudest statement you'll ever make. And that's exactly what she did. Commander Eli Calder took another step closer, his tone unchanged, calm, steady. A man who wasn't just trying to de-escalate, but sending a silent warning: you better think carefully about your next move. But Brooks wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. He shifted on his feet, clearing his throat like he was trying to swallow his pride. "We've got procedures, Commander," Brooks shot back. His voice cracked just a little. She refused to identify herself. She resisted. Eli didn't blink. He didn't argue. He just pointed, slow and steady, toward the live stream still going on just feet away. "Looks to me like the entire town already knows who she is. You still want to lie about it on camera?" Brooks's face twitched. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. He glanced toward Officer Reed, silently pleading for backup. But Reed didn't move. His arms were still crossed, but his eyes flickered, nervous, calculating. He knew they were in too deep. Any wrong move now, and it wouldn't just be a PR nightmare. It could be the end of both their careers. Holbrook, standing off to the side, shifted uncomfortably, cracking his knuckles again like he wasn't sure if he should step in or step back. For the first time, all three men seemed unsure. The power was slipping, and they could feel it. Maya didn't move. She didn't say a word. She just turned her face slightly toward the cameras, making sure the whole world could see her bruised wrist, her steady eyes, and the way she refused to bow her head. The silence broke when someone from the crowd shouted, "Let her go! We're all watching!" Another voice followed, louder this time. "We got it all on video! Every second!" Brooks flinched, his jaw clenched so tight you could see the vein pulsing in his neck. He leaned down, his mouth so close to Maya's ear she could feel his breath. "Don't think this is over," he whispered, his voice shaking with something that sounded a lot like fear disguised as anger. Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to, because they both knew it was over, at least this part. With a frustrated grunt, Brooks yanked the cuff keys from his belt and unlocked her wrists. The sound of the cuffs popping open felt louder than the sirens still wailing in the distance. Maya slowly brought her arms forward, rolling her wrists, feeling the sting of the skin where the metal had dug in deep. She didn't rub them. She didn't look down. She just turned around facing Brooks, Reed, and Holbrook, three of them standing there, exposed in front of their own community. Eli took a small step to her side, just close enough to let them know she wasn't standing alone anymore. The crowd started to move in closer, voices rising louder. "We saw everything," someone yelled. "You're done, Brooks," another voice echoed. Brooks looked around, eyes darting left and right, searching for an exit that didn't exist. His face burned red with humiliation. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Because deep down, he knew what everyone else knew. He'd lost. Maya raised her voice, not shouting, but speaking clear enough for every person on that street and every viewer online to hear. "This is how it happens, over and over again. You get stopped for no reason. You get treated like you don't belong. You get cuffed without cause while they call for backup like you're a threat." She took one slow step forward, locking eyes with Brooks. But not today. The street erupted in cheers. The crowd started clapping, whistling, raising their phones higher. And for the first time since this all began, Maya felt the weight start to lift just a little. Eli leaned in, his voice low but firm. "You want to press charges? You've got a case." Maya nodded slowly, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "Oh, they'll hear from me soon enough." As she turned to walk away, her bag still slung over her shoulder, the cameras followed her. Every step she took felt like a victory, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small on these streets. Brooks didn't follow. He didn't say another word. He just stood there, frozen in place, knowing that for the first time in a long time, someone stood taller than his badge. And the whole world saw it happen. The video didn't just go live. It exploded. While Maya Carter walked away from the wall they tried to break her against, a digital wildfire had already started. The teenage girl who hit "Go Live" on her phone had no idea she was about to broadcast one of the most talked-about moments the town of Mapleton had ever seen. By the time Maya reached the end of the block, her name was already trending online. Not just in Georgia, not just in the South, but nationwide. Navy SEAL harassed. Number "Stand with Maya." Number "We saw it all." Those tags started filling every corner of the internet. People who had never heard her name. People who didn't know anything about Mapleton. People from every part of the country were watching the replay, commenting, and asking the same question. How does this keep happening? But this time, it was different. Because this time, the whole thing had been streamed live. No edits. No police body cam. Malfunctions. No press release twisting the story. The world had seen the truth as it happened raw, real, undeniable. And the crowd on that street? They were still there. Dozens of people now standing together, pointing their phones, raising their voices, refusing to let this moment slip into the background like so many others had before. Maya could feel it, even as she walked away. The weight of their eyes, their phones, their whispered words. For years, she had walked alone, in combat, in silence, in rooms where people questioned her worth without ever knowing her story. But not today. Today, she could feel the shift. She wasn't just another black woman being dismissed on a street corner. She was seen. And that was power. Eli caught up with her as she crossed the street. He kept his voice low, just between them. "It's already viral," he said quietly. "You need to see it." Maya glanced over her shoulder toward the crowd, toward Brooks, still standing there, looking like he wanted to sink into the pavement, toward the officers frozen in their own mess. And for the first time all day, Maya let herself breathe just a little deeper. "I don't need to see it," she replied softly. "I lived it." But deep down, she knew Eli was right. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Viral videos don't solve everything. Sometimes, they just light the fuse. And the fuse had already been lit. Back on the live stream, the comments were flooding in faster than the girl holding the phone could read them. Thousands of viewers, some cheering, some furious, all of them watching. And the replay? It was already being clipped and shared across TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. People were cutting the moment where Maya announced her name and rank. They were looping the part where Brooks unlocked the cuffs and backed down. They were blasting the audio of her voice standing firm in the face of humiliation. "You sure you want to do this? We're all watching." Not today. Those words were already being shared like rally cries. Memes were popping up. Commentators were jumping on. Activists were retweeting. News outlets started calling it the Mapleton standoff. But Maya didn't care about headlines. She cared about the truth. And the truth was now in the hands of thousands of strangers who had watched it unfold in real time. As she and Eli made their way toward his unmarked car, people on the sidewalk started clapping. Not loud, not like a parade, but slow, steady, like the quiet sound of something building something bigger than one moment, bigger than one person. And that's when Maya knew this wasn't just her moment anymore. It belonged to every single person who had ever been told to lower their voice, to keep their head down, to take the hit and move on. Not this time. She opened the passenger door and paused, looking back one last time at the scene she was leaving behind. The crowd, the cameras, the officers scrambling to save face. She didn't wave. She didn't say another word. She just stood there for a heartbeat longer, letting the weight of what had just happened settle in the air. And somewhere deep down, Maya knew the real fight was just getting started. The thing about people like Darren Brooks is, they don't expect you to know what to do when they make their move. They're used to people freezing. They're used to fear. They're used to controlling every second of the moment. But Maya Carter, she was used to something else entirely. She'd been trained for situations far more dangerous than this. And while she'd held back to avoid giving them a reason to escalate, it was clear now they were going to escalate no matter what she did. Brooks yanked her arm harder, pushing her shoulder higher up toward her ear, in a move designed to cause pain. His voice was low, threatening, the kind that was meant to make you panic. "You're done," he hissed. "Nobody's gonna help you now." But Maya knew better. She knew when someone was bluffing. She felt the tremble in his grip, the way his voice cracked ever so slightly. He was performing for the crowd, for the cameras, for the officers standing behind him, but Maya wasn't interested in playing the role he had written for her. And that's when she made her move. Not reckless, not violent, tactical. Maya shifted her footing just half a step, grounding herself the way she'd done 1,000 times on the mat. She loosened her body for a split second, just enough to make Brooks think she was giving in. And in that tiny moment of overconfidence, when he leaned his weight into her, she acted. With a swift, controlled motion, she shifted her shoulder, rotating her body just slightly while keeping her arms tight to avoid looking aggressive. Brooks, caught off guard by the shift in balance, stumbled forward. His foot caught the edge of the sidewalk, and he nearly lost his footing completely. The crowd gasped. A couple of phones shook as people tried to capture what just happened. Brooks cursed under his breath, trying to recover, but it was too late. The moment had already played out in front of dozens of witnesses. Maya didn't move to attack. She didn't fight back. She just stood there, calm, still in control of her breathing. She had done just enough to stop him from slamming her into that wall again. Nothing more. Nothing less. But to Brooks, that was enough to make him snap. "You resisting me?" he shouted, loud enough for the live stream to catch every word. Maya shook her head slowly, her voice clear and loud for everyone to hear. "I am not resisting. I am standing here just like I have been since the start." Brooks looked around, realizing too late that the eyes of the entire street were now locked on him, and worse, the phones, they were still recording. The teenage girl pressed in closer with her live stream. You could hear her whisper on the video. "He just lost control. We're still live." Everyone's seeing this. Officer Reed stepped in now, trying to recover the scene. "Stop resisting," he repeated, but his voice cracked. He knew the lie wouldn't stick. Not this time. Maya turned to face the crowd again. Her voice didn't shake. "My name is Lieutenant Maya Carter, United States Navy SEAL. I am not armed. I have not resisted, and you're all seeing this." The people standing on the sidewalk started speaking louder. Some shouted. Some called out for them to let her go. One older man yelled, "She's a soldier! Let her go!" The tension snapped like a rubber band, stretched too far. Brooks lunged again, grabbing for Maya's wrist to pull the cuff tighter, but Maya shifted her stance, just enough to keep him from forcing her off balance. She wasn't trying to fight. She was defending herself, using every ounce of training to control her body without escalating the scene. But Brooks didn't see control. He saw challenge, and that's when the patrol car pulled up, slow, calm. No sirens. Commander Eli Calder stepped out, shutting the car door gently behind him. He didn't run, he didn't shout. He just walked forward with his hands open and steady. And right there, with the entire street holding its breath, Eli spoke. "That's enough." Brooks stiffened at the sound of his voice. He turned his head slowly, and the color drained from his face when he recognized who it was. Eli stopped just a few feet away, standing tall, his badge hanging from his belt, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Let her go." Brooks didn't move at first. His fingers tightened on Maya's wrist like he still had a choice. But he didn't. Eli took another step closer. "I said, let her go. Now." And right there, in front of everyone, Maya Carter watched as the man who had tried to humiliate her, tried to break her, finally realized he was the one who'd lost control. Because Maya had never resisted, she had endured, and the world had seen it all. Commander Eli Calder didn't step in like a hero trying to steal the spotlight. He didn't need to. He walked toward the chaos with a calm so heavy it seemed to silence everything around him. The kind of presence that said, "I'm not here to make a scene, I'm here to shut one down." And Darren Brooks hated every second of it. Eli didn't look rushed. He didn't bark orders. He didn't puff his chest like Brooks had done minutes earlier. No. Eli walked with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by a single one of them. When he reached the sidewalk, he stood tall, his badge clipped to his belt, one hand resting casually on his hip. The way his voice cut through the air made everyone on that street, officers and bystanders alike, turn and listen. "Officer Brooks," Eli called out evenly. "Mind telling me what's going on here?" Brooks shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening like he'd just been called to the principal's office. But this wasn't school. This was his ego being put on trial, right there in front of the entire town. His grip on Maya's arm slackened, but his pride refused to let him back down completely. "We've got a non-compliant suspect," Brooks announced, louder than necessary, playing to the crowd like it was some kind of twisted performance. "Claiming to be military. We were verifying her ID." Eli didn't blink. He already knew the game Brooks was playing, and he wasn't buying a single word. "She's not just claiming," Eli replied, his voice cutting sharper than any weapon. "That's Lieutenant Maya Carter, United States Navy SEAL. I trained with her in Norfolk. I've seen her in action. She's the real deal." For the first time since this mess started, Brooks faltered. He glanced at Holbrook and Reed like they might step in and save him. But they didn't move. They didn't even make eye contact. Because deep down, they knew the moment had shifted. The lie they'd been building was crumbling in real time, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Maya felt Brooks' grip tremble. It was slight, but she felt it. The man who had shoved her against a wall minutes earlier was cracking, and it wasn't her fists that had done it. It was the truth, spoken loud enough by someone they couldn't ignore. Eli stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that only the officers could hear. "You know you're done here, right? The cameras caught everything. You want to keep digging this hole, or are you ready to back off?" Brooks clenched his teeth so hard it looked like his jaw might snap, but Maya could see the fear creeping into his eyes. Not fear of Herbert, fear of what would happen when the cameras started rolling in the courtroom instead of the street. Holbrook shifted his weight, glancing around at the gathering crowd, the live stream still rolling. He cleared his throat like he wanted to say something, but Eli raised his hand, cutting him off before he could speak. "I'll take it from here." The words landed like a hammer. Holbrook took a step back. Reed dropped his arms to his sides, looking anywhere but at Eli. Brooks looked like he was going to explode. Maya braced herself, expecting one last desperate move, but instead, Brooks let out a shaky breath and stepped back, unlocking the cuffs with a sharp, bitter click. The metal dropped away from her wrists, but the sting it left behind burned even deeper. Eli turned to Maya, his expression softening just slightly. "You good?" Maya rolled her wrists slowly, wincing at the red marks, but she nodded. She was bruised, not broken. "I'm good," she replied, her voice steady as ever. Eli gave her a small nod, then turned back to Brooks. "You'll hear from Internal Affairs. Count on it." Brooks didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence said it all. Maya looked toward the crowd one last time. Dozens of face-some strangers, some neighbors she hadn't seen in Yearsall, staring back at her. But this time, they weren't looking away. They weren't pretending they hadn't seen what happened. They weren't silent. The teenage girl with the phone wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, "We got you." And Maya nodded not to her, but to all of them, because standing up wasn't just something you did for yourself. It was something you did for every person watching who needed to believe they could do the same. Eli motioned toward his unmarked car. "Let's get you out of here." Maya didn't move right away. She turned, facing Brooks one last time. Not to gloat, not to threaten, but to make sure he saw her standing tall, unbroken, with the whole world watching. "You sure you want to do this?" she repeated softly, the same words she'd spoken before. And this time, Brooks had no answer. Maya turned on her heel, walking away with Eli by her side, leaving behind the wreckage of a system that had tried and failed to crush her spirit. But she knew this wasn't the end. No, this was just the beginning. Maya sat in Eli's car staring out the window, the streets of Mapleton blurring past her like ghosts she couldn't shake. Her wrists still burned from the cuffs, but it wasn't the pain that weighed on her. It was the truth she couldn't ignore. The real fight hadn't even started yet. What just happened on that sidewalk was only a preview of what the system was about to throw at her. Eli kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift. He didn't say much at first. He knew better than to fill the silence with meaningless words. Maya had trained him to read a battlefield, and right now, she was standing on one just, not the kind marked by gunfire or sand. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I need to take you in." "Protocol." Maya turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. "You serious?" Eli nodded, looking almost embarrassed to say it. "You know how this works. Internal Affairs is already breathing down my neck. They want a statement, paperwork. Something to cover their backs when this blows up bigger than it already has." Maya leaned back in her seat, exhaling slowly. Of course. The machine had to protect itself. It didn't matter that she'd done nothing wrong. It didn't matter that the whole town had seen the truth. The department needed to frame this as a misunderstanding procedure to review all sides. They needed to make it look like they were doing their job, not covering up their mess. She closed her eyes for a moment. "Fine," she whispered. "Let's get it over with." The station looked exactly how she remembered it from years ago, cold, square, and colorless. A building that promised service and protection on the outside, while hiding all its dirty secrets inside. Eli walked her through the back entrance, avoiding the main lobby. Cameras were already outside. Reporters hungry for a soundbite. They weren't going to get it from her. Not yet. They put her in a plain white room. No windows, no clock, just a table, 2 chairs, and a single camera blinking red in the corner. She sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the walls. The air conditioning hummed overhead, but the chill in that room had nothing to do with the temperature. This was designed to wear people down, keep them isolated, make them question if anyone on the other side cared. When the door finally creaked open, it wasn't Eli who walked in. It was someone Maya had never seen before. A woman, mid-40s, sharp beige blazer, hair tied back tight like she hadn't let it down in years. She carried a thin folder, holding it like it weighed 100 pounds. "Lieutenant Carter," the woman said. sitting across from her with practiced calm. "I'm Lena Ford. Internal Affairs." Maya didn't respond. She didn't need an introduction to know why this woman was here. Lena placed the folder on the table and folded her hands on top of it. "We're conducting a standard review of today's incident. Nothing formal yet. Just want to understand what happened. From your perspective." Maya leaned back in her chair, her face unreadable. She knew this game too. They wanted her to slip up, to say something they could twist into a justification for how she'd been treated. Lena smiled, almost too politely. "Would you say you felt threatened? Intimidated by the officers?" Maya narrowed her eyes slightly. "Is that how you're going to write it? Like it was my feelings on trial?" Lena's smile didn't falter. "We just need to understand your emotional state. It helps us write a balanced report." Maya let out a short breath, more like a laugh with no humor. "My emotional state? You want to write about that? Fine, write this down. I stood there cuffed, pressed against a wall, humiliated in front of my own community, and I still stood tall." Lena's pen hovered for a second before she scribbled something on the page. Maya leaned forward, planting her hands on the table. "Let me make one thing clear. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't resisting. I was standing still while they built a lie around me. And now, you're sitting here trying to clean it up." Lena pressed her lips together, flipping the folder shut. "Thank you for your time, Lieutenant Carter. We'll be in touch if we need anything further." Maya watched as Lena left the room, the door closing with a soft but deliberate click behind her. She knew what that sound meant. It meant they weren't done. It meant they were already rewriting the story. Eli returned a few minutes later, looking frustrated but resigned. "They're letting you go," he said softly. "For now." Maya stood, rubbing her wrists. "What's next?" Eli didn't have to think long. "They'll wait. See how the media plays it. Hope it dies down." Maya nodded slowly, her face hardening. "Then we make sure it doesn't." Eli held the door open as she walked out of that cold white room. Maya Carter knew what she was up against now. It wasn't just two bad cops. It wasn't just one town. It was an entire system, and it had just made her its biggest problem. But they had no idea. She was ready to fight. Maya didn't make it 20 minutes down the road before it started. Her phone lit up in the passenger seat of Eli's car, ping after ping after ping. Messages, links, screenshots. She didn't even have to open them to know what they were. The department had started its play, while Maya had been sitting in that white-walled room with Lena Ford scribbling notes that would never see the light of day. Someone else had been working behind the scenes, moving faster than she expected. A clip had already surfaced online. A cropped clip, edited to show nothing but her arm twisting as Brooks stumbled back like she'd attacked him out of nowhere. No audio, no context. Just a 15-second loop that played over and over again like it told the whole story. Maya knew exactly where it came from. There was only one place that footage could have come from inside the department. It was so obvious it almost made her laugh. Eli saw her expression shift. "What is it?" She turned the screen toward him. The headline at the top of the video said it all. "Black ex-Navy SEAL attacks officer during routine stop." Underneath, the view count was climbing by the second. Tens of thousands of shares, comments pouring in, people calling her a liar, a fraud, a disgrace to the military, a danger to law enforcement. Maya clenched her fists in her lap, nails digging into her palms. "It's already started," she whispered. Eli slammed his hand on the steering wheel, cursing under his breath. "They cut the footage. They made it look like you were the aggressor." Maya nodded, her jaw tightening. "And they'll keep pushing it until everyone forgets what really happened." She didn't need to scroll to know what the comments were saying. She'd seen it before. It was always the same script. Call her aggressive. Call her violent. Dismiss the truth with a quick headline and let the internet do the rest. But this time, Maya wasn't going to let them control the story. "We're not going to win this with feelings," she said, her voice cold, clear, and focused. "We need facts. Real ones. Full footage. Witnesses. Everything." Eli glanced over at her. "You serious about going public?" Maya turned to him, her eyes sharp. "I'm dead serious." By the time they reached her small rental apartment on the edge of town, the edited clip had already made it to national media. Conservative commentators were spinning it faster than she thought possible. One even suggested Maya should be charged with assaulting a peace officer. Another questioned whether women like her should have ever been trusted with military training. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the news ticker crawling across the bottom of the screen. Combat-trained woman turns violent on police community in shock. Eli paced the room behind her. "I've seen the full footage," he said, rubbing his face like he couldn't believe they were already this deep in the spin cycle. "I know where they're hiding it. But I need time to pull it." Maya leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "How much time?" Eli sighed. "Couple of days, if I'm lucky. They'll try to bury it." Maya nodded slowly. "Then we start building now." She opened her laptop and began typing, pulling up the live videos people had streamed from their phones. She clipped the parts that showed her standing still, identifying herself, refusing to resist. She saved screenshots of the comments, the people who said they were there, the ones who said they had it recorded too. She started drafting a public statement short, direct, undeniable. She wasn't going to shout. She wasn't going to rant. She was going to lay out the facts. "I am Lieutenant Maya Carter, United States Navy SEAL, honorably discharged after years of service. On the 7th of July, in my hometown of Mapleton, I was wrongfully detained, falsely accused, and publicly humiliated by officers who knew exactly what they were doing. The footage you're seeing is edited. The truth is bigger than 15 seconds of manipulated video, and it's coming." She hit save but didn't post it yet. Not until she had the receipts. Eli stopped pacing and leaned on the back of her chair. "What about legal help?" Maya nodded. "I've got a call scheduled with the ACLU tomorrow." Eli let out a slow breath, nodding like he was finally seeing the shape of the fight ahead. "They're not ready for you," he muttered. Maya looked up at him, her face hard but calm. "No, but they're about to find out." As the night stretched on, the storm outside grew louder. But inside that tiny apartment, Maya Carter wasn't just planning her defense, she was preparing for war. By sunrise, Maya Carter's face was everywhere. It didn't matter where you looked. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. The story had already taken on a life of its own, just like she knew it would. But it wasn't her story being told, not the truth. No, the story now belonged to the ones who moved fastest to twist it into something it wasn't. Cable news shows ran back-to-back coverage, playing the same cropped footage over and over again. A blurry 15-second clip. No sound, no context. Just Maya spinning away from Officer Brooks, the moment before he lost control. The media ran with it like it was fact. The headlines were brutal. "Veteran or threat? Navy SEAL. Allegedly attacks officer during routine stop. Mapleton officer assaulted by ex-military suspect. Was it justified force or dangerous escalation?" Maya sat on the edge of her bed, watching the circus unfold on her small television. She had seen a lot in her life. She'd heard bombs drop, bullets fly, and people scream for help in the dark. But somehow, this felt worse. Because this wasn't a battlefield she could see. It wasn't something she could fight with strength or tactics. This was a war of narratives, a war of perception, and she knew all too well perception, when left unchecked, could kill just as easily as any weapon. The comment sections were filling up with the usual poison. Racist slurs, thinly veiled threats, people posting her military record, questioning its authenticity, people calling her a disgrace to the flag she had risked her life to defend. Eli called her just after 8. "You seeing this?" he asked, but his voice said he already knew the answer. "They're faster than I thought they'd be," she replied, her voice low, steady, but tight like a wire pulled to its limit. Eli cursed softly on the other end. "I'm still working on pulling the unedited footage. They've buried it deep, but I'll get it." Maya nodded even though he couldn't see her. "We don't have much time. They're shaping the whole narrative before the truth even has a chance." And that's when her phone buzzed again. A friend from her SEAL team had sent her a message. Just 3 words. "They've started already." Attached was a link to a far-right forum. Maya clicked it, already knowing what she'd find. There it was, the video, blown up, slowed down, repeated with dramatic music and an ominous voiceover. This is what happens when military training falls into the wrong hands. The thread below was worse than she imagined. Thousands of people feeding the lie, dozens of fake accounts pushing her name through the mud, trolls framing her as an example of what they called reverse racism. She wanted to smash her phone against the wall, but she knew better. This was how they operated. They didn't care about facts. They cared about outrage, about clicks, about feeding fear. Eli called again an hour later. "I've got something," he said. "It's not the full file, but it's enough to prove the footage they released was cut." Maya stood up, grabbing her laptop off the kitchen counter. "Send it! Now!" Minutes later, a secured file landed in her inbox. She clicked play. There she was, standing still, announcing her name, showing her ID, clear audio, full context. The moment Brooks grabbed her first, the moment he pushed her into the wall before she ever moved, Maya felt her throat tighten. This was it. Proof. Not opinion. Not a viral clip. Proof. But she knew better than to rush. She needed this done right. She reached out to a group of veteran advocates she trusted. They'd stood by her in the past. They knew how to get the truth out without getting it lost in the noise. They agreed to help. While they prepared the official release, Maya drafted a personal statement. She posted it on her social media, short and to the point. "What you've seen is a lie. The truth is coming. Stay ready." Within minutes, her post was being shared by Black veteran organizations, civil rights groups, and military supporters across the country. People started to push back, demanding to see the full footage, demanding answers, demanding accountability. For the first time in days, Maya felt the balance shift, but she knew this wasn't over. The department was still silent. No press release, no apology, nothing but a wall of lawyers and spin doctors buying time. Eli called again later that night. "They're feeling the pressure," he said. "I've heard talk that Brooks and Reed are being told to keep their mouths shut. Internal affairs is scrambling." Maya let out a slow breath. "Good, let them scramble." She sat back in her chair, staring at the timeline on her laptop. The world was watching. The truth was finally moving faster than the lie. But she knew the next move had to count. And Maya Carter had never played to lose. Maya Carter had spent her life following orders, in training, in combat, in uniform. But not anymore. She wasn't waiting for permission to tell the truth, not when the system had already tried to bury it. She sat at her kitchen table, the laptop glowing in front of her, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The footage Eli had pulled sat in a secure folder, unedited, unfiltered. Everything the world hadn't seen. It wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about showing the game for what it really was. How fast the system moved to protect itself. How quick it was to rewrite reality. Eli had warned her. "Once you post this, there's no taking it back." Maya didn't hesitate. She clicked upload. The video went live. It started with her standing on that sidewalk, feet planted, voice steady. The audio was crystal clear. No aggressive movements, no shouting. Just her name, her rank, her ID held high. Then came the part they had cut, the moment Officer Brooks grabbed her first, shoving her into the wall. The close-up of his hand tightening around her wrist. His voice hissing in her ear, daring her to fight back. The footage kept rolling, the full takedown, the cuffs, the threats, all of it, and then it showed the moment that had gone viral but in full context. Maya had barely shifted her weight when Brooks lost his balance. No assault, no aggression, just a trained reflex to avoid being slammed into brick. The video ended with the crowd shouting, the teenage girl's voice cracking as she whispered, "We got you." Maya didn't add dramatic music. She didn't cut it for effect. She posted it raw, just the way it happened. Within minutes, the internet caught fire again, but this time, with the truth. The hashtags started flying. Number, release the full footage. Number, stand with Maya. Number, we got you. Celebrities started retweeting. Military veterans posted their support. Civil rights groups flooded social media with side-by-side comparisons of the department's edited clip and Maya's full footage. People weren't just outraged, they were furious. Eli called again, his voice almost shaking with disbelief. "It's everywhere, Maya. News outlets are picking it up. Even national anchors are calling out the department for lying." Maya leaned back in her chair, staring at the wave of notifications filling her phone. For the first time in days, she felt the lie cracking wide open. But she wasn't done. She started posting links to witness videos, statements from people who had stood on that sidewalk, clips of the teenage girl's live stream, showing the crowd speaking up. The noise grew louder by the hour, and Maya was right at the center of it, standing taller than ever. Then the phones started ringing. Reporters, lawyers, activists, even some from military networks she hadn't heard from in years. Eli called again later that night. "You're not going to believe this," he said, almost laughing. "The department just took down their original statement. No press release, no spin, nothing. They're scrambling." Maya closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. She wasn't celebrating, not yet, because she knew they'd come back swinging. They always did. But this time, she had the truth on her side, and she wasn't letting go. The next morning, her inbox was full again, but this time with support. People she didn't even know were sending messages. Veterans, mothers, teachers, kids. One message stood out. A woman from Alabama wrote, "I showed my sons your video last night. We talked about what it means to stand for something bigger than yourself. Thank you for giving them someone real to look up to." Maya read it twice, her throat tightening. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never really had been. Later that afternoon, Eli showed up at her apartment with a stack of papers. "I pulled every complaint filed against Brooks and Reed over the past 5 years," he said. "It's worse than I thought. They've done this before. A lot." Maya stared at the stack. "And no one stopped them?" Eli shook his head. "No one even tried." Maya felt the weight of every name, every face that had stayed silent because they didn't have cameras rolling, because they didn't have a voice loud enough to fight back. But now? Now they did. "We need to make this bigger than just me," she said, her voice firm. Eli nodded. "I already reached out to the ACLU. They want to meet." Maya stood, grabbing her jacket. "Let's go." Because the fight wasn't about clearing her name anymore. It was about tearing down the wall they had built to keep people like her silent. And Maya Carter had just kicked the first brick loose. When the official press conference was announced, nobody expected much. People had seen this before, departments circling the wagons, delivering statements so dry they sounded like legal disclaimers. Maya didn't expect much either. She didn't even plan to watch it live, but Eli told her to turn on the television anyway. "It feels different this time," he'd said. "You need to see it." So she did, and what happened next made every breath she'd held for days finally feel like it was worth it. The camera cut to the podium at Mapleton Police Department headquarters. Standing there, not in uniform but in a plain gray shirt and a loose tie, was Chief Gerald Rohr. His face didn't carry the smugness Maya was used to seeing in moments like this. He didn't look like a man trying to protect his officers. He looked tired, worn down by something heavier than bad press. The room fell silent as he leaned into the microphone, cleared his throat, and began to speak. After reviewing all available evidence, including unedited body camera footage and multiple citizen videos, Rohr paused, his jaw tightening. "The Mapleton Police Department acknowledges that serious misconduct occurred during the detention of Lieutenant Maya Carter." Maya leaned forward on the edge of her couch, her heart pounding in her chest. Rohr kept going, voice heavier with each word. "Effective immediately, Officers Darren Brooks and Jason Reed are terminated from the Mapleton Police Department." The reporters in the room erupted in shouted questions, but Rohr raised his hand to quiet them. "Additionally," he continued, "we are forwarding all internal documentation to the State Special Prosecutor's Office for further investigation and potential criminal charges." Eli called her instantly. His voice was almost breathless. "They just threw them under the bus. Both of them." Maya could barely process it. It felt surreal, like someone had hit pause on the nightmare she'd been trapped in for days. But Rohr wasn't done. "The city of Mapleton," he added, "will extend a formal apology to Lieutenant Carter and offer a civil settlement in recognition of the harm caused." Maya muted the television. She didn't need to hear any more. It was real. The fight she thought she'd lose before it ever started had just turned into something bigger than she imagined. Later that week, she stood in a courtroom, not as a defendant, but as the one who had forced the truth into the light. Across the aisle, Brooks sat slumped in his chair, his face pale, eyes sunken like a man who had finally realized the badge wouldn't save him. Reed sat beside him, stone-faced, his career crumbling around him like dust. The judge read the ruling with no hesitation. "Based on the evidence presented, Officers Darren Brooks and Jason Reed are hereby held liable for all physical, emotional, and financial damages incurred by Lieutenant Maya Carter. Restitution is set at $1.75 million, payable within 90 days. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Maya didn't smile. She didn't look for the cameras. She just stood there, breathing in the moment, not for the money, not for the headlines, but for the truth that had finally been recognized in a place designed to bury it. As the session ended, Brooks looked at her one last time, but there was nothing left in his eyes. No pride, no fight, no power. Just a hollow man who had built his career on fear and lies, now forced to sit in the wreckage of his own making. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones, cameras, questions flying like bullets. But Maya didn't stop for any of them. She walked straight past, toward a small group gathered by the courthouse steps. An elderly white woman reached out, her hands shaking as she grabbed Maya's arm. "You did what we should have done a long time ago," the woman whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Maya swallowed hard, nodding softly, unable to find the words, because she knew this wasn't just a victory for her. It was a crack in something much bigger. A crack wide enough for the light to finally break through. Long after the headlines started to fade, long after the cameras packed up and moved on to the next story, Maya Carter was still standing. She knew better than anyone that victories like hers didn't last if you didn't build something from them. So, she did. 3 months after the settlement was finalized, Maya stood on the stage of a small community center in downtown Atlanta. The room was packed, standing room only. Old veterans, young kids, teachers, single moms, local business owners. People from every walk of life who had followed her story, watched the truth come out, and now wanted to do more than just clap from the sidelines. A banner hung behind her that read, "The Lorraine Project. Empowering voices, building leaders, fighting injustice." It was named after her mother, Lorraine Carterth, woman who had raised Maya to believe she was worth more than the world ever tried to make her think. Maya had promised herself long ago that if she ever got the chance, she'd build something bigger than herself, something that could outlive every headline, every viral clip, every courtroom win. And this was it. She stepped up to the mic, adjusting the sleeve of her navy blue blazer. She took a slow breath and looked out at the sea of faces waiting for her to speak. "I stood on a sidewalk in my hometown, thinking I was alone," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "But I wasn't. You were there. You stood with me. Whether you were in that crowd, watching online, or standing in your own truth somewhere across this country." The room was silent. Every person leaned in to catch every word. They tried to silence me. They tried to erase the truth. But all they did was prove how powerful it is when people refuse to look away, when people stand up. She paused, her throat tightening. "This isn't just my story. This is ours." Maya wiped the corner of her eye and smiled. "That's why I started the Lorraine Project, because I don't want the next Maya Carter to stand on that sidewalk alone. I don't want the next young black woman in uniform to wonder if anyone will have her back when the system turns on her. I don't want any of us to have to fight with nothing but our fists and our fear." The crowd started clapping softly, then louder, until the whole room was on their feet. "We are building something here," Maya continued. "Scholarships for young leaders, legal aid for families fighting injustice, community training to teach people how to hold power accountable, and we're just getting started." After the event, people lined up to shake her hand. Some wanted to thank her. Some wanted to tell their own stories. Some just wanted to stand in the presence of someone who had refused to break. One woman, older, with silver hair and tearful eyes, grabbed Maya's hands tightly. "You gave me hope for my grandson," the woman whispered. "He wants to join the military. I've been so scared for him. But you showed me he can fight and still come home with his head held high." Maya squeezed her hands back. "He's already got the most important thing, someone who believes in him." Later that night, Maya sat in the empty community center long after everyone had gone. Eli walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and sat beside her on the edge of the stage. "Think you made your mom proud?" he asked, breaking the silence. Maya looked up at the banner one more time, feeling the weight of everything they had built in such a short time. "I hope so," she whispered. Eli leaned back, looking around the room. "You know this isn't the end, right?" Maya nodded. "It never is." They sat there for a long while, drinking cold coffee and planning the next steps, because they both knew the work was just beginning. The next morning, Maya received a letter in the mail with no return address. She opened it carefully, half expecting it to be another hate letter, but what she found stopped her cold. It was written in pencil, on lined notebook paper. in handwriting that looked like it belonged to a child. "My name is Jordan. I'm 10. My dad showed me your video. I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people and tell the truth. I'm scared sometimes, but my dad said courage means doing it anyway. Thank you for showing me how to be brave." Maya read the letter twice, her throat closing around the lump forming in her chest. She folded it carefully and placed it on the table beside her medals, not because it was a trophy, but because it was the reason she had fought it all. For every Jordan, for every person who needed to know that standing up could make a difference. For every voice that had been silenced but refused to stay quiet, Maya Carter smiled to herself, standing by the window as the sun broke over the horizon. The work ahead was long. The fight would never truly be over, but she was ready. And this time, she wasn't standing alone. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. And sometimes, the fight we think is ours alone turns out to be much bigger than us. Maya Carter's story isn't just about one woman standing up to injustice. It's a reminder that standing still, standing firm, and speaking the truth even when your voice shakes can light a fire that reaches far beyond what you ever imagined. For those of us who have lived long enough to see history repeat itself, this story is a call to remember that our voice still matters. It's easy to believe we've already done our part, that our time to stand up has passed. But the truth is, courage has no age limit. Whether you're 30 or 70, the world still needs people who aren't afraid to call out what's wrong and fight for what's right. So if this story moved you, if it reminded you that you're never too old to make a difference, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next story. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice matters, and together, we are stronger.